My life, Emily Thompson, looks from the outside like a painting painted in vibrant colors, full of light, sharp, and seemingly flawless. At 26, I am a successful graphic designer with long, honey-colored hair, what my close friends like to call my personal identity. The loose strands fall over my shoulders, catching the sun like a small stream, reflecting a free spirit and a quiet, rebellious streak that I always keep to myself. I am passionate about my work, love the feeling of being challenged, and have built a dream life in Seattle, the city of dreamy drizzles and misty afternoons. But behind the facade of perfection, inside the cozy two-story Thompson house, where afternoon sunlight filtered through the windows to illuminate family photos neatly arranged on shelves, there was a thin, tense atmosphere, an invisible veil that hung over every wall. The feeling was only intensified as the family's biggest event of the year approached, my sister Brooke's wedding. I sat at the table in the living room, eyes intently going over the to-do list for the big day. A slight smile appeared on my lips and quickly disappeared, giving way to a vague, lingering anxiety. Deep inside, I nurtured a somewhat naive hope that this wedding could be an opportunity for my sister and I to erase the distance, to find the intimacy that had long since faded. The feeling of being trusted, protected, and sharing everything with her, now only a vague, distant memory. I scrolled down the screen of my phone, stopping at an old photo. My sister and I as children, blonde hair flying, laughing together under the old oak trees in our garden. The scene came back to me as fresh as if it had happened yesterday. I remembered nights in bed together, snuggled together under the thick blanket, sharing every childish secret, from wild dreams to funny fears. "You mean the world to me, Brooke," I whispered, as if the words could reach her, beyond time and space. The sound of hurried footsteps on the stairs brought me back to the present. Brooke appeared, carefully made up, wearing a trendy dress, probably recently purchased. She stared at me, her cold eyes scrutinizing every detail of me. "Oh, you're still here, Emily?" Her voice rang out, light but with a sharp edge. "I thought you were busy. I heard you just landed another big project?" Emily Thompson again, always the star. I looked up, keeping my composure, a skill I'd honed over the years to deal with such subtleties. "Just checking on things for the wedding, Brooke. Congratulations, you look absolutely beautiful today." I smiled, trying to make it genuine, even as an undercurrent of unease rippled through me. Brooke smirked and stepped closer. Her eyes flicked to my hair, pausing for a moment, then met mine. "Of course. But no matter how hard I try, you always know how to shine better, right?" A chill ran down my spine. That phrase, so familiar it was frightening, had followed me from childhood to now. It was an echo of years of hidden competition, an obsession that had lasted through adolescence and now, adulthood. This relationship had always been overshadowed by nameless rivalry. I wished it would disappear. I wished we could simply be two sisters, loving, protecting each other, like any other normal sister. At that moment, my mother, Susan, walked in, holding a tray of freshly baked cookies, the sweet aroma filling the room as if to ease the tense atmosphere. My mother was always the one who tried to maintain balance in the family, but sometimes that very effort made things more awkward. "Oh, honey, stop being so mean." Mom laughed, her voice cheerful but strained. Then she turned to Brooke, her eyes sparkling with happiness. "Brooke, I have good news. Emily is going to be your maid of honor." Brooke froze. Her smile faltered like a lamp blown out by the wind. Her eyes turned to me, first in surprise, then in a flash of anger. "Maiden of honor? Mom, I thought—" Mom quickly interrupted as if to stop the argument that was brewing. "She is your real sister, your closest friend, right? She will help you a lot at the wedding." I was filled with mixed emotions, a little happy to be standing next to her on the most important day of her life, but also full of anxiety when I met her eyes at that moment. I knew this was the beginning, and I could only pray that it would not end the way I feared. Brooke smiled, a wry smile, and then came over to hug me, A formal hug, cold and distant. Oh, thanks, Mom. That's wonderful, sis. I know you'll do just fine, as long as you don't try to overshadow the bride. The words were spoken softly enough for me to hear. Her smile was still there, but her gaze was as sharp as a knife hidden in silk. I understood. It wasn't a blessing. It was a warning of a silent war about to begin on the happiest day of her life. Our childhood was a colorful picture, painted with innocent laughter and sweet memories. I still remember clearly those days when the two sisters grew up in the beloved Thompson family home, where every corner of the wall, every brick of the yard had our mischievous footprints. The atmosphere was initially pure and strangely innocent. Brooke, 3 years older than me, was always the leader in every little adventure we imagined. Seemingly harmless games became our own world. We shared everything, from the bedroom with the bunk bed, which I always wished to sleep on, to the silly, childish secrets that only the two of us understood. A memory came back to me as clear as an old movie. Brooke and I, blonde under the nightlight, giggling on the bunk bed, whispering ghost stories. Shy 8-year-old Emily would often look up with wide eyes and ask, "Brooke, are there ghosts under the bed?" Brooke, 11, always feigning bravery, replied confidently, "Of course not, silly. But if there were, I'd protect you." We hugged and laughed, the laughter filling the small room, dispelling all childhood fears. We often played hide and seek under the shady trees in the garden and jogged in the afternoons on the small dirt path around the park near our house. Children's running competitions were an indispensable part of that childhood. I, being smaller, always tried to stride closely behind my sister. In the echoing cheers of my father, Michael, "Go, Brooke! Go, Emily!" I felt more strength. Brooke often finished first, but I always followed closely behind, breathing heavily and full of pride. Mother Susan would be the first to run to hug Brooke, her eyes shining. "My daughter is so good. Wonderful." And then she turned to me, smiling slightly. "Emily is also very good. You are following closely behind Brooke. Next year, you will surpass her." At that time, I did not pay attention to Brooke's flashing gaze, a strange, slightly annoyed look. But looking back now, perhaps that gaze was the first crack in our seemingly perfect picture. My parents always tried to portray a model family atmosphere, warm, loving. But over time, I gradually became aware of a subtle, silent bias, something children rarely name but feel with all their hearts. Mom and Dad began to favor Brooke more, especially when she failed or felt insecure. They thought it was a way to appease her, to compensate. But it inadvertently created a silent imbalance within me, like a scale that was tilted and no one bothered to correct it. I remember one time Brooke brought home a bad test. The whole family surrounded her, comforting, encouraging, as if trying to gather all their love to fill her disappointment. Dad. Michael hugged her, his voice warm as honey. "It's okay, daughter. If you don't get it this time, try harder next time. You're very smart, you just haven't found the right way to study." At the same time, I, who had just brought home a perfect test, only received a casual nod and a fleeting smile from Mom. "Mama," Susan looked at me and said, "Emily, go into your room and do your homework. Let me help your sister review." I stood still. A moment of confusion, then disappointment. An invisible gap began to appear and it gradually grew over the years. I looked at my long hair in the mirror, something that so many people had complimented me on that made me stand out naturally. But now it was a sign that set me apart, that I couldn't blend in with my sister, that I couldn't just be a normal kid in my parents' eyes. Brooke walked by, her eyes scanning my hair, and she muttered, just loud enough for me to hear, "Long hair. What a hassle." Us. The once close sisterhood began to be tested by quiet comparisons. Little conflicts accumulated like silent drops of water falling into a full glass. I tried to fit in, tried not to shine too much, but all my efforts were in vain. My mother would say, "My Brooke is so smart, Emily. You should learn from her." Or, "Brooke is so good at communicating, you should open up a little more." Those seemingly harmless words, like small knives, gradually cut into my confidence and deepened the simmering jealousy in her. Brooke began to withdraw, spending less time with me. The nights of whispering under the covers gradually disappeared, replaced by long, awkward silences. I still tried to hold on, to find what we used to have, by inviting her to play the games she loved. One afternoon, I saw her sitting quietly by the window, her eyes distant. I walked in, full of hope. "Brooke, do you want to play basketball? I remember you loved it," I asked, my voice soft. Brooke just shook her head, not bothering to turn around. "No, you're busy. Go play by yourself." Her voice was indifferent, cold like a stranger. Then she walked away, leaving me standing alone in the backyard, holding a basketball, a feeling of emptiness and loneliness covering me like the falling night. From that moment, I knew the light of sisterhood had begun to fade, giving way to a vague darkness. A once vibrant childhood symphony had now begun to lose its rhythm, which, I had a hunch, was just the prelude to a much longer, more complicated, and unpredictable chapter. The memory of that academic competition still silently clings to me like a scar that has never fully healed. It was a chilly May afternoon in the large auditorium of Lakeside High School, a solemn, airy, yet oppressive space. I, Emily Thompson, 15 years old, stood on stage holding the sparkling gold trophy, the first prize in the city-level speech contest. The spotlights shone, washing my long blonde hair in a layer of dazzling light like a sparkling waterfall. Applause echoed throughout the auditorium, but inside I felt a mixture of pride and confusion, as if this victory was something that had just been bestowed upon me, and yet something I had not dared to touch for too long. "Please give a round of applause for Emily Thompson, this year's winner," the principal's voice boomed through the microphone. I stepped off the stage, my eyes searching silently for Brooke, my older sister in the audience. She was sitting in the third row, 18 years old, her eyes fixed on the stage but not showing any emotion. Her face was cold, as if covered in a thin layer of frost. I knew she had entered this competition 2 years ago and lost in the final round, a wound she never showed, but I always felt. As I approached, Brooke stood, smiling a forced smile, the kind that had become familiar. It never reached the eyes. She gave me a formal hug, her arms cold and indifferent. "Congratulations, Emily. I knew you could do it." Her voice was stiff, devoid of any warmth of pride or joy. "Thanks. I really didn't think I would win," I replied, but I felt lost. Brooke's eyes slid from the trophy in my hand to my striking blonde hair. Her gaze, slow, deliberate, was as if she were measuring, analyzing, comparing something only she could understand. "So you're still here," she said, just loud enough for me to hear, just loud enough for it to pierce my mind. "You're always better than me. You take everything. You always have to be the winner, right?" Her voice carried a bitterness and torment, both a reproach and an unconcealable grievance. I froze. The joy vanished like the sun behind a thick cloud. A feeling of guilt crept in, making the hand holding the trophy feel heavy. "It's not like that." I quickly grabbed Brooke's hand, my eyes pleading. "I was just lucky. I wish you could—" Brooke jerked her hand away as if burned. "Stop it, Emily. I'm going home. You stay and enjoy your victory." She turned and walked away, leaving me and the trophy behind, now a cold, silent lump of metal. I watched her retreat, a sinking feeling in my chest. That was the moment I realized my victory had become her defeat. And from that moment on, the fragile bond between us was stretched to its limits. The scar of jealousy had formed, and I had a feeling it would stay for a long time. I took the trophy home and carefully placed it in a dark corner of my closet, as if hiding a guilty object. I began to learn to hide my success, hoping that it would lessen her pain. Instead, I felt like a caged bird, not allowed to sing, not allowed to fly. Mother Susan looked at me proudly, her eyes shining. "My daughter is so talented. Why don't you bring the trophy to the living room to display?" She smiled, wanting me to share her joy, but I just smiled. "It's okay, Mom. It's fine." I avoided her eyes, afraid she would see the conflict in my heart. Brooke walked past, her eyes flicking casually to the closet. "What's the point of showing off?" she said, her voice contemptuous. "Everyone knows Emily is a genius." The words were as light as a breeze, but as sharp as a knife. They squeezed out any remaining joy in me. My parents looked at each other, a little confused, then pretended that nothing happened. They always chose to ignore the conflicts between us, thinking that silence was the best way to let things settle down. But they didn't know that it was that very ignorance that helped the distance grow deeper and deeper. I stood alone in my room, looking at the mirror. My long hair, which I used to be proud of, had now become a symbol of my difference. It made me different, made me stand out, made me a thorn in my sister's side. Should I cut it off? Would it make you feel better? I gently touched my golden hair, my eyes following each strand as if searching for an answer. I had vaguely thought of it as a sacrifice, a price to pay for peace. I no longer wanted to shine, no longer wanted to stand out. I just wanted to go back to the old days when the two of us laughed together, carefree and unblemished. But deep down, I know, a haircut cannot erase what is rooted in the heart. The scars of jealousy are not skin deep, and it will take more than a scissors stroke to heal. As high school went by, I tried to keep Brooke from getting worse, an effort that was both persistent and futile. Her jealousy wasn't limited to academics or personal achievements. It spread like a toxic mold to every corner of my life, silently covering and eating away at every moment of happiness I had. I still remember clearly the afternoon Coach Smith, a tall woman with a smile as gentle as the spring sunshine, walked up to me after class. "Emily, I'm really impressed with you. You have the makings of a great athlete. Would you like to join the team?" Her voice was full of excitement, her eyes sparkling with genuine belief. It was a great opportunity, a chance for me to challenge myself, to discover a new passion that was opening up before my eyes. But as I turned to look at the practice field, where Brooke was running her final laps in her track uniform, her figure small and strong, I knew what would happen if I said yes. Brooke was a key member of the track team, and if I joined, it would be another simmering rivalry between us. I was tired of the wordless battles, the judgmental looks, the half-truths. I didn't want to be a thorn in her side anymore. I forced a smile, a forced, regretful one, and said softly, "I'm sorry, Coach. I think I should focus on my studies." Coach nodded, his eyes showing a hint of disappointment. I caught Brooke looking over, and a smug smile appeared on her lips, a smile that was more heartbreaking than her outburst. But Brooke's competition didn't stop at the scoreboard or the track. It extended to my personal relationships. I had a best friend, Lily, who was bright and cheerful and a safe haven from the turmoil of my teenage years. But Brooke always found a way to get in the way, growing closer to Lily, even spreading petty rumors that made Lily start to doubt me. I still remember that afternoon in the school cafeteria. Lily and I were laughing about a movie that had just come out. Suddenly, Brooke walked by and accidentally spilled a glass of orange juice all over my white blouse. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, Emily. I'm so clumsy," she said, feigning embarrassment, but with a look of genuine amusement in her eyes. I frantically wiped the stain away, trying to stay calm. "It's okay," I muttered. She turned to Lily, her voice suddenly strangely friendly. "Oh, Lily, did you know Emily often talks badly about your boyfriend?" Lily froze, her eyes filled with suspicion. I was speechless. My heart sank. "What are you talking about? I whispered, hoping she would retract her accusation. But Brooke just shrugged, smirked, and walked away, leaving Lily and me in a heavy silence. Lily stood up, her eyes colder than ever. "I think I should go, Emily." She turned and walked away, not giving me a chance to explain. I just stood there, helpless, as if bound by an invisible rope, unable to struggle, unable to tell the truth. I tried to hold on to that friendship, but it seemed like it was too late. I always tried to keep the family together, always being patient and humble, just hoping to reduce the tension between us. But the rift between us grew deeper and deeper. Every time I went to my parents, hoping for their understanding, I only received the same words over and over again like an old song. Mother Susan would gently but firmly say, "You're the younger sister, Emily. You have to give in to your sister. Brooke is more sensitive and vulnerable than you." Father Michael continued, "You are stronger, so you should sympathize with her. Brooke always feels like she is not good enough." Those words, though seemingly meant to be kind, were like small stabs to my heart. I felt constrained, as if I had to shrink myself to fit the image my family wanted, a quiet shadow next to Brooke's prominence. I asked myself over and over again, what should I do? Would it be easier if I just disappeared? When I looked in the mirror at my long blonde hair, which people often complimented, I felt an uneasy contradiction. My looks had made me popular, but they had also made me the target of jealousy. I had sacrificed so much, from my athletic dreams to my true friendships, just to keep the peace. But I knew deep down that all those sacrifices were for nothing. The problem had never been that I was trying too hard, but that Brooke's jealousy was ingrained in her, and that my parents had, knowingly or not, bred her. And now all I knew was I was exhausted. College life opened a new chapter, like a door opening in the morning mist, giving me the opportunity to step out of my old shadow, to chart my own path. I had hoped that the geographical distance would heal the cracks, that the time apart would soften the jealousy, help us mature and look at each other with more forgiving eyes. But the reality was not so gentle. I chose to study at the University of Washington, pursuing a degree in graphic design. I immersed myself in the world of color, shape, and limitless ideas. I worked hard. From small projects to large-scale competitions, my ability gradually affirmed. I won prestigious scholarships, won many design awards, and received recognition from professors in the industry. I still remember Professor Lane's comment in one class. "Wow, Emily, your designs are both creative and professional. You have great potential in this field." Those words fueled my desire, reinforced my belief in the path I was on. I felt like I was truly living my passion, free to reach for great things. While I was finding my footing, Brooke was still struggling to find herself. She attended another university in Washington state, but nothing seemed to fit. She kept changing majors, from business to communications to education, but nothing she could commit to. Her studies were becoming a burden. Her calls home were filled with sighs and barely concealed frustration. "Mom, I can't take this anymore. I hate marketing. Maybe I'll switch to psychology." I heard her voice on the phone, tired and helpless. Susan's mother said gently but worriedly, "My dear, how many majors have you changed? You must find a stable direction." After graduation, our lives took two very different paths. I was offered a job at a top graphic design firm in Seattle. The title of design lead was a dream come true. I lived in a small, self-decorated apartment with a career wide open and an exciting sense of freedom. I remember the moment I got that call. The voice on the other end of the line was solemn and calm. "Congratulations, Emily Thompson. We were very impressed with your resume. You have been officially hired as design team leader." "Really? Oh my gosh, thank you so much," I shouted into the phone, so happy that I wanted to hug the whole world. It was the result of years of relentless perseverance. While I was soaring high in my career, Brooke was still stuck in a spiral of uncertainty. She was unemployed constantly, changing jobs like changing clothes. From sales, office assistant, to other temporary jobs, none of them kept her for long. In the end, she often returned to her parents' house, living temporarily and lamenting about life like a sad song that never ended. I returned home to find her sitting on the sofa, eyes glued to her phone screen, looking depressed. "Failed the interview again. Damn it. No one wants to hire someone like me." She let out a long sigh as if she had run out of breath. Susan's mother sat down next to her, gently placing her hand on her shoulder to comfort her. "It's okay, daughter. Mom will cook your favorite dish." The differences between us were becoming more and more apparent, not only in our circumstances, but also in the way she looked at me. My success was like a mirror reflecting what she could not achieve. I could feel her eyes on me every time I talked about my work, about the projects I was working on. A look that was both critical and bitter. One afternoon, I was chatting on the phone with my best friend Alex about a new project when I caught Brooke's eye in the doorway. She stood there, watching me with a sour look in her eyes. When I hung up, she walked over to the photo I had taken of her with the design trophy. Her eyes filled with something unspoken. "Why do you always have it so easy?" she muttered, her voice choked with emotion. "Why does everyone admire me? Why do I always have everything?" I wanted to help her, to reach the deepest part of her, but I didn't know where to start. "I want to help Brooke, Alex," I told Alex that night, my voice as hard as a rock. "But I really don't know how. Every time I take a step forward, she just moves further away from me." It felt like we were trapped in an invisible loop, where each step I took to grow up deepened the gap between us, a quiet but thick gap filled with jealousy and unnamed pain. Life moved on, taking me in unexpected twists and turns without warning. I still remember the small art show I organized in Seattle, where I first showed my new designs to the public. The space was bright, full of creativity, and buzzing with passionate conversation. My parents were there, as was Brooke. Brooke looked gorgeous as usual, but her eyes kept scanning me, scrutinizing my every move, as if searching for any sign that I was outshining her. It was at that event that Brooke met Jordan, a young architect, handsome, with eyes that sparkled with intelligence and a smile as warm as the early spring sun. What confused me was that, at first, Jordan seemed to pay a lot of attention to my work. He stood for a long time in front of a digital painting, intently examining each line as if deciphering a secret story. "These pieces are stunning. Emily, you have a great eye," Jordan told me, his voice sincere and filled with admiration. "I was fascinated by the way you combine colors and shapes. It's very special." I smiled, feeling a surge of joy at being recognized by a stranger without prejudice. "Thank you. It was nice meeting you." Brooke stood nearby, clearly listening to the entire conversation. There was a flicker of annoyance in her eyes, a familiar flash of jealousy like an old scratch. Not letting things get any further, she quickly stepped forward, neatly but firmly stepping between Jordan and me. "Jordan, you're here. I wanted to introduce you. This is my sister, Emily." Brooke laughed, putting her arm around Jordan possessively. "She does graphic design, a little bit of everything, mostly sitting at a computer all day." Her tone was sarcastic, as if my efforts and accomplishments were just idle amusement without any value. Jordan was momentarily taken aback by this, but he remained polite. Brooke quickly took over the conversation, talking about herself and her accomplishments that I knew she had never had, and not forgetting to interject insinuations that made me seem insignificant. "My sister is a workaholic. You know, the kind who has no time for a personal life," Brooke said, then glanced at me meaningfully. She wanted Jordan to believe I was a rigid, monotonous person with nothing to do but the projects on screen. Jordan just smiled, but I saw his eyes occasionally darting towards me, as if he wanted to say something but was holding back. I felt a slight lingering unease rise in my heart, but I decided to ignore it. I didn't want to ruin the atmosphere of the exhibition that was my passion. Soon after that night, Brooke and Jordan started dating. Just a few short months later, they announced their engagement. I still remember that night at my parents' house, Brooke walking into the living room triumphantly, holding up the sparkling ring like a trophy. "Look, everyone, Jordan proposed. I'm getting married." Her voice rang out like a triumphant declaration. My parents, Susan and Michael, were almost overwhelmed with joy. They ran to hug Brooke, their congratulations pouring out. My mother, her eyes moist, said, "Oh, my daughter, you finally found happiness. This is wonderful." My father patted Brooke on the shoulder and said proudly, "Congratulations, Brooke. Jordan is a real sweetheart." At that moment, I became a silent shadow in my own house. It seemed like no one was paying attention to me anymore. I still tried to smile, a forced smile, and said, "Congratulations, Brooke. I'm really happy for you." Brooke stepped closer to me, holding her ringed hand out in front of me deliberately. There was something challenging in her gaze, and she spoke as if she were carving the words into my heart. "Yes, sister. He chose you. He chose you." It felt like someone had stabbed a knife into my heart. I knew the depth of the meaning of those words. Not just a confirmation of love, but a declaration of ownership. A triumph mercilessly displayed as if she had taken what she believed I had longed for. My parents, sensing the tension, made things worse by leaning heavily on Brooke. My mother turned to me, her voice slightly reproachful. "Emily, you're a grown-up now. You should think about getting married. Who's going to notice you if you keep burying yourself in work?" My father added, his voice like a stamp. "That's right. Brooke has found a place to settle down. You should learn from your sister." The bias was like an old rift that had been deepened. There was now an unbridgeable distance between Brooke and me, an invisible, cold barrier. That night, I called Alex, my best friend. My voice was low and heavy. "Alex, do you think I should go to the wedding? I feel like I'm stuck in a play I never wanted to play." Deep down, I still held on to a glimmer of hope. Hope for something miraculous, for a sudden reconciliation. But I didn't know it at the time. It was all just a prelude to a bigger tragedy waiting to happen. Brooke's invitation to be maid of honor came like a ray of light through the fog, both bright and ominous. A few days after the engagement party, I received a call from her. Brooke asked me to meet her at a familiar cafe, a place that had been my warm haven, with its soft armchairs and the scent of roasted coffee in the air. At first, I was taken aback, then a fragile hope rose in my heart. Maybe this was the chance for us to really talk, to put the old pieces back together. I went there with a conflicted feeling, part anxiety, part anticipation. Brooke was already seated, her hands clasping a cup of coffee, her eyes staring out the window. Her smile when she saw me was either happy or cold, a mask that hid something deeper. "What did you call me for?" I asked, trying to keep my voice as even and light as possible. She put down her glass, stirred slowly with her spoon, and said calmly, "I want to invite you to be the maid of honor at my wedding." I froze for a second. My heart skipped a beat. The invitation was too unexpected, especially after all the bickering, the meaningful glances, and the never-ending competition. "Maiden of honor? Are you sure?" I asked, unable to hide the surprise in my eyes. She stared at me, her lips still holding the razor-thin smile, but her eyes were sharp. "Of course. You're my sister, aren't you?" Then she leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to a whisper, but each word felt like a needle piercing her flesh. "Just one thing. Don't overshadow the bride. Don't try to attract attention. This is my day." I felt a chill run down my spine. It was no longer a request, it was a warning. Clear, unambiguous. She didn't want me to shine, didn't want me to be present in the way everyone was used to. She wanted me to be in the background at her own wedding, a backdrop. Still, I tried to swallow the unease that was rising in my heart. I told myself maybe she was just too stressed about the wedding preparations. Maybe beneath all those thorns, there was still some love. Maybe the wedding day could be an opportunity for reconciliation. "I understand, Brooke. I will do everything I can to make your wedding a wonderful one." I nodded, regaining my composure. Though my heart was clenched, I agreed, in the faint hope that our sisterhood could be saved. Brooke stood up and hugged me. The hug was as bland as a formality, without warmth or memory. Then she leaned close to my ear, whispering so softly that only I could hear. "Good. I know you won't let me down." The words didn't feel like encouragement. They felt like a silent contract, locking me into a role I hadn't chosen. She left. I sat there, motionless, staring at the cold coffee in front of me. A feeling of unease slowly crept up, like darkness seeping through the cracks of my soul. The months of wedding preparations were approaching, and I had a feeling I had just entered a play whose script had been written, with my role as the one to endure, not to resist. I tried not to notice the signs, the awkward sarcasm, the suspicious glances, the side-by-side comparisons that peppered every conversation. I fooled myself into thinking that sisterhood could overcome anything, but I was wrong. I asked myself, why did I agree? Why did I keep trying to please her, even though I knew that it would always lead to pain? Maybe because I still had the image of the two children in the past, two sisters who used to laugh together, cry together, and share naive dreams. Maybe I still held out hope that one day everything would go back to the way it was. But now, thinking back, I understand it was just an illusion. A beautiful memory eroded by time and jealousy to the point of distortion. I knew that being a bridesmaid meant spending more time with Brooke, accepting demands, criticism, and even insults. But I still nodded, like someone who was betting on something unreal. That seemingly small decision in the end became the turning point that changed my entire life. The planning for Brooke's wedding began as a thorny journey that I did not expect. I poured all my heart, time, and fragile hopes into it, in the hope that sincerity could heal the invisible rift between us. I designed every little decoration myself, carefully selected each flower and each ribbon as if weaving a sweet dream. I spent hours helping her try on each wedding dress, paying attention to every stitch. I wanted the wedding day to be perfect, not only for Brooke, but also for the faint hope that it could mend the broken bond between us. But as the wedding day drew near, Brooke became more unpredictable, irritable, and controlling. I vividly remember our first bridesmaid dress shopping trip, a seemingly simple moment that turned out to be the beginning of a slow burn. I tried on a soft, pastel blue dress that matched my fair skin and golden hair. As I walked out of the dressing room, the sales assistant looked at me in awe. "Miss Emily looks stunning in this dress. It brings out your natural beauty," she said, her eyes brimming with sympathy. I turned to look at myself in the mirror, and I had to nod. The dress made me feel confident, elegant, like I had found a part of myself. But then my gaze strayed to Brooke. She was standing there in her white wedding dress. Elegant, but her face was dark, her eyes piercing. "No, that dress is too flashy," Brooke said coldly. "Emily, you should pick something else. Something simpler, less flashy." I was stunned. "But it matches the color scheme of the wedding?" I tried to keep my voice calm. "No means no." Her voice was sharp and absolute, leaving no room for rebuttal. "And remember, on your wedding day, wear as little makeup as possible. Keep your hair tied up, not down like usual. I don't want you to overshadow the bride." My heart sank as if it had just fallen into an abyss. It was her fear of being overshadowed again. It was me having to control myself again. I forced a smile, swallowed my lump, and chose another dress. Solid color, no patterns, no highlights. I nodded in agreement to all the requests because I just wanted everything to be peaceful. I still tried to believe that if I was patient enough, sacrificed enough, things would be different. But then one evening when I came home from a long day, I heard Brooke talking to Susan in her room. The door was ajar, and I overheard a conversation that broke my heart. "Mom, I don't know what to do with Emily's hair," Brooke said, her voice full of worry. "It's so pretty, so striking. I'm afraid everyone will look at it and forget I'm the bride." Susan's mother's voice was soft and gentle like a lullaby. "There will be a way, daughter. Don't worry." I stood frozen in the hallway. Frozen. "There will be a way." What way? The words crept into me like a premonition. Was Brooke really that obsessed? Did she really want to control my hair? I looked in the mirror in my room, at the hair that was once my pride, something I always took care of with all my self-love. And then I decided to cut it short. Not much. Just a few centimeters. Enough to not stand out too much. Enough to ease her invisible worries. I told myself, if just a little concession could help maintain the peace, then I would do it. But I was wrong. That sacrifice did nothing to appease me. It only made me feel like I was slowly withdrawing, fading away from my own life. The harder I tried, the more I felt myself being swallowed up in a vortex of hurt and resentment. The warning signs were there. In my eyes, in my words, in my actions, but I pretended not to see them. I still believed, blindly, that sisterhood would conquer all. The rehearsal dinner was held at a swanky seafood restaurant on Seattle's bayfront, with a gorgeous view of the sparkling water. At first, the atmosphere seemed warm and full of laughter, but beneath the surface of intimacy, I could sense a quiet tension creeping in. Both families and closest friends were there. The clatter of knives and forks mixed with the murmur of conversation. Jordan, the groom-to-be, was laughing and chatting animatedly with his close friends at a corner table, amid glasses of wine and candlelight. I tried to blend into the atmosphere, though my mind was still filled with vague, unnamed worries. My eyes followed Brooke, who was smiling brightly at Jordan, her radiance a perfect mask. And I wondered, did she ever feel comfortable around me? While everyone was chatting, Mark, an old friend of Jordan's, happened to walk past our table and stopped to say hello. We had met a few times at Jordan's events, and I remember him as a funny, likable guy. Emily, oh my gosh, it's been so long. You're still as radiant as ever. Remember, Jordan always talked about you. I always regretted not getting to know you better, especially after Brooke's art show, Mark said, his voice innocent, completely unaware of the bombshell he'd just dropped on the dining table. The air froze. I could feel every eye on me. Jordan glanced at Mark, his eyes hard as if begging him to stop. Brooke, who was sitting next to Jordan, paled, her eyes widening in shock, then quickly turned to glare at me. Mark, what are you talking about? You got the wrong person. Brooke chuckled, her grip tightening on Jordan as if to assert her position, trying to overshadow her friend's slip of the tongue. But Mark continued, not understanding the unusual silence. How could it be wrong? Jordan kept talking about the blonde girl who was the maid of honor at this wedding. She lit up the whole show that day. That statement was like a spark thrown straight into the dry haystack. Brooke suddenly stood up, her face red with anger and humiliation. She turned to me, her eyes filled with resentment. You're trying to stand out again, aren't you? You were planning on seducing Jordan from the start, weren't you? I froze. The words hit me like a slap in the face. What? What are you talking about, Brooke? I haven't done anything wrong. I stuttered, trying to defend myself in shock. Jordan tried to calm the situation. Brooke, calm down, he was just joking. He gently placed his hand on her shoulder, but Brooke shook it off. Brooke's anger was beyond measure. All the doubts, jealousies, and insecurities that had been building up for so long were unleashed. You're always like this. Always trying to one-up me, always stealing my limelight. Her voice boomed, harsh, making the surrounding tables turn to look. My parents, Susan and Michael, immediately intervened, trying to sit Brooke down, whispering words of reassurance. But the mood had completely collapsed. The room felt awkward and oppressive. I sat there, my heart pounding, my throat dry. Everything before my eyes was spinning like a whirlwind. I picked up the glass of water on the table, trying to swallow the rising choking sensation. But the coldness of the water could not soothe the burning and humiliating feeling in my chest. I'll take my leave first, I whispered to my parents, my voice hoarse, then quietly stood up, leaving the dining table like a shadow, not bothering to look back at anyone. That night, I lay in bed, unable to sleep. Brooke's accusations, her burning eyes, Mark's indifference, and Jordan's helpless silence played over and over in my head like an endless loop. I had tried my best to keep the peace, to be patient, to sacrifice, and yet, in the end, I had become a thorn in everyone's side. In my despair, I reached for my usual sleeping pill, the one I relied on when my sleepless nights turned into hell. I didn't want to think anymore. I just wanted some peace, some oblivion, however temporary. As the drug began to take effect, my body slowly drifted into a state of unconsciousness. My last thoughts drifted through my mind lightly. I don't want anything bad. I just want everything to be good. Then everything went dark. A deep, quiet darkness, but secretly hiding a terrible tragedy that I could not yet imagine. Friday, the night before the wedding. I'd been naive enough to think that after the storm of the rehearsal dinner, tonight would be a quiet moment, a temporary refuge for my heart to heal. I'd hoped that sleep would be a sedative, a way to forget Brooke's harsh words and Jordan's judgmental stares. Instead, it opened a door straight into the worst nightmare of my life. I drifted into a drugged sleep, completely oblivious to what was happening. A terrifying betrayal that crept silently into the darkness like a thief in the night. The next morning, I woke up with a start. The pale light of dawn filtered through the gaps in the curtains, gently sweeping across the familiar bedroom in my parents' house. My mind was still hazy from the after effects of the sleeping pills, heavy as if covered in a layer of fog. I raised my hand to stroke my hair, a familiar gesture every morning to regain a sense of familiarity. But instead of touching long, silky locks, I felt short, stubbled rough ends. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I jumped up as if electrocuted, my heart pounding like a drum. A wave of unease washed over me. I rushed into the bathroom, turned on the light, and faced the mirror. The white light from the fluorescent bulb seemed to expose the lie. My long blonde hair, once a symbol of freedom, individuality, and pride, now cut brutally short. Not just short, but scraggly, crooked, as if someone had hastily cut it with something not scissors, but a dull, ragged, insensitive knife. "It can't be," I screamed. The sound caught in my throat, choked with terror. Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring the trembling reflection in the mirror. Who had done this? Why had this happened? Why had it happened to me? I ran down the stairs, my heart pounding, looking for my parents in a panic. They were sitting at the kitchen table, the air frozen by something unnamed. Mom, Susan, quietly put down her coffee cup. Dad Michael held the newspaper, but his eyes were furtive in my direction. They both looked at me with eyes that were both averted and shaken by a feeling I couldn't name. Probably guilt. Mom. Dad. Who did this? I choked, tears streaming down my cheeks, pointing at my violated hair. Susan's mother stood up, her voice low and soft, but filled with embarrassment. Emily, don't make such a fuss. We just want the best for you. That's right, Emily, Michael's father said, folding the paper, his voice trying to sound calm, but I could hear the hardness in it. You know, Brooke is very sensitive. We just want her to have a perfect wedding day without anything overshadowing it. I was stunned. Every word they uttered was like a knife stabbing deep into my heart. Parents? I stuttered, a numb feeling spreading throughout my body. Parents cut my hair while I was sleeping? Susan's mother stepped closer, her eyes heavy and pleading. Brooke is afraid that everyone will just look at her striking hair and forget that today is her big day. We just want her to be happy. And then, as if in a carefully choreographed scene, Brooke came down the stairs. Her gaze swept over my hair, absent-minded but threatening, and then stopped at my gaze, smiling wickedly. I told you, Brooke said, her voice cold and unruffled. It took drastic measures. Now I'm the one who shines. It's going to be okay. My world collapsed around me. Not just my hair, my beliefs, my identity, the things I thought were the safest place to be. I turned to my parents, my tears now gone, my gaze filled with despair and brokenness. I can't believe it. You did this to me? My voice was choked, trembling with unnameable anger. Michael's father stepped closer, his voice low, without a trace of fatherhood. You should know better. A short while later, he looked at me, his eyes darkening at the sight of my disheveled hair. He didn't say anything, just held me tight as I cried into his shoulder. Fuck! I can't believe they did this. Alex spat out each word, his voice shaking with anger. Emily, you have to do something. You can't let them walk all over you like this. My parents kept calling and texting, begging and threatening. They wanted me to attend the wedding. They needed me to save face for the family, but I had nothing to lose. The painful realization made it impossible for me to turn back. No. I wiped my tears, my gaze hard as steel. I will not appear there. Not like this. And I will never let them manipulate me again. I turned to Alex, my voice steady and determined. Will you help me, Alex? I need to show them how wrong they are. That they can't control my life. Alex nodded, squeezing my hand. I knew, from that moment, that I was no longer alone, and it was time for me to stand up, for myself. After that haunting night, I understood that I could not give up. The pain and resentment in my heart were no longer just wounds. They had turned into a burning fire, igniting a new strength inside me. I was no longer the weak Emily who always lived to please others. I was the Emily of the present, once trampled, but no longer afraid. I had to turn this pain into action, to show them that they had made a serious mistake. Alex took me to the salon of a close friend of his, a prominent hairstylist on Capitol Hill. She had bright blue violet hair, tattoos swirling down her arms, and a sympathetic look in her eyes when she saw my messy hair. I sat in a large chair in front of the mirror and silently studied my reflection. A girl with a harsh haircut, puffy eyes, and a blank expression. That was me. Can you give me a different hairstyle? One that makes me walk with my head held high, I said softly, but each word was as hard as steel. I didn't want to hide the truth anymore, didn't want to bow my head anymore. I wanted my appearance to be a statement of the strength I was slowly finding. The stylist smiled, her eyes sparkling with encouragement. You're going to have a haircut that will turn heads. She began to cut, each stroke as decisive as if she were freeing me from my old, fragile shell. My unkempt hair was transformed into a sharp, modern pixie. My features came into focus, sharp, direct, and no longer shy. When she finished, I looked in the mirror and saw a completely different version of myself. Not the Emily others had defined, but the Emily I had created. Resilient, independent, and unyielding. A new power was rising within me, strong and unstoppable. Leaving the salon, Alex and I went shopping. I knew I would no longer be a bridesmaid. I would not wear anything that would make me stand out in a crowd. I needed something completely different, something that would say everything I wanted to say without having to say a word. And I found it. A crisp white suit with clean lines and a clean silhouette. It was a statement of rebirth, of taking control of my life, a symbol of a new beginning. As I walked out of the dressing room, Alex stared at me speechless. I turned to him and said firmly, I'm not going there to avoid it. I'm going there to face it. He nodded, his eyes sparkling with confidence. I know you can do it, Emily. You're stronger than you think. I began to make plans. I called a few close friends and told them the whole truth. Their outrage made me feel that I was not alone. They promised to come, to support me with all their love and loyalty. I also contacted Sarah, a photographer I had worked with on a project, and Mark, a reporter for the local newspaper I had worked for. Sarah, Mark, I have a story to share, I said over the phone, my voice calm but determined. A story of betrayal and the courage to stand up. I want the truth to be known. They agreed without hesitation, their voices filled with compassion and commitment. I took a picture of myself with my new haircut and white suit and posted it to all my social media accounts. The caption was short but powerful. When someone tries to clip your wings, learn to fly with new ones. There's strength in speaking your truth. So the photo went viral. Thousands of likes, comments, and messages from strangers expressing admiration. I felt empowered, a strength that comes from support, from souls who have been hurt just like me. Then I sat down at my computer and wrote a letter to Brooke. Every word I wrote was decisive, not hateful, just setting a boundary I would never let anyone cross again. Brooke, you've always wanted me to fade away. Ever since I was little, you've tried to make me live in your shadow, and now you and your parents have crossed the line. But that ends here. I'm not going to live to please you anymore. I didn't come to your wedding to submit. I came to assert myself. I won't let anyone else define my worth ever again. I sent the letter. I knew it would be a blow to her pride, but it was necessary. I stood up, looking at myself in the mirror again. Short, sharp hair, crisp white suit, eyes shining with confidence. It's time, I whispered. It's time to face the truth. Tomorrow would be a day no one in my family, especially Brooke, would ever forget. And I was more than ready. The wedding day. The altar was resplendent with white flowers and hundreds of flickering candles. The soft light of the candles reflected on the delicate petals, creating a scene that seemed to come out of a dream. The guests had all gathered. The murmur of conversation mixed with the melodious melody like the background music for a perfect song. Brooke, in her pure white wedding dress, was as beautiful as a princess from a fairy tale. She stood next to Jordan on the altar, her eyes sparkling with happiness. Susan and Michael's parents sat solemnly in the front row, their faces glowing with satisfaction and pride. Everything was like a perfect picture, without a scratch, without a ripple. An ideal happy day. Just as the pastor was about to announce the couple, the large doors of the chapel suddenly opened. A bright light from outside flooded in, as if a fateful cut had torn apart the fragile peace that had enveloped the place. And I walked in. Every eye, from the bride and groom to every guest, turned back at once. The atmosphere fell silent for a moment as if time had stopped. I was dressed in a crisp white suit, the sharp tailoring hugging every line of my body. My short pixie cut, individual and sharp, highlighted the contours of my face. My eyes were proud, my face devoid of fear or regret. I was no longer a forgotten bridesmaid. I was a presence, a statement. My photographer, Sarah, quietly clicked the shutter in the background, capturing every moment. Reporter Mark from the local newspaper was also there, standing in the corner, quietly taking notes. The whispers began to spread, like undercurrents colliding with each other. The whole church was silent. Brooke and Jordan were frozen, their eyes wide, speechless. My parents, Susan and Michael, paled. Their gazes were fixed on me, as if they were seeing a ghost from the past. I walked steadily, my steps as steady as my heartbeat. I headed straight to the front row, where Alex was waiting. He smiled, his eyes glowing with pride as I gently sat down next to him. When it was time for the maid of honor, Brooke motioned to another bridesmaid. Her speech was brief and innocuous, but then suddenly I stood. I took the microphone, my eyes fixed on Brooke and Jordan, fearless. Before you go any further, I have something to say. My voice rang out, clear and decisive, the sound of truth ringing through the aisle. To my sister Brooke and her fiancé Jordan, Brooke's face was white, her eyes wide with panic. Jordan paused, his eyes confused as if seeing me for the first time. I continued, my voice low and heavy, each word like a nail hammered into the cold stone floor. I used to believe that sisterhood was the most sacred thing. I tried to preserve it at all costs, even if it meant shrinking back so my sister could shine. I hope today we can truly be together. Together we can live in love and forgiveness. I glanced at my parents just for a moment, then back at Brooke. But the truth isn't always pretty. The truth is that I was betrayed. Turned away by the people I loved the most. The family I trusted so much, they betrayed me. I ran my hand through my short hair, an act both proud and suggestive. Last night, while I was sleeping, they cut my hair, because they were afraid I would overshadow the bride. They wanted me to be quiet, to be obscure, forever living in my sister's shadow, never allowed to shine in my own way. The church hall shook with a cacophony of whispers. A storm of gossip filled the air. Jordan turned to Brooke, his eyes filled with doubt. The happiness that had once sparkled on his face had vanished. Brooke trembled, her face pale, her lips pressed together. My parents jumped from their seats, panicked, and rushed to me. "Don't touch me," I said, my voice as strong as a knife cutting through all interference. I want to say this. No one has the right to define your worth. No one has the right to clip your wings. Power is not in the length of your hair or the splendor of your wedding dress. Power is in the truth. And true power is in standing up for yourself, for what you believe is right. I looked at Jordan. There was only confusion and confusion in his eyes. Jordan, I sincerely wish you a happy marriage. But remember, a relationship built on lies will never survive. I put down the microphone, raised my head proudly. Congratulations on your happiness. My voice rang out again, confident, without a trace of trembling. I turned and left the altar, each step determined. Alex followed. I didn't look back. Behind me, there was a chaotic murmur, Brooke's faint sobs echoing. But I was no longer in pain. I had told the truth. I had freed myself. Jordan turned to look at Brooke. His eyes held unmistakable disappointment. The groom's face no longer held any trace of happiness. Everything had fallen apart. After Brooke's wedding, my life as Emily Thompson officially changed. What I said at the altar not only shocked my family, but also sent shockwaves through social media and the community. Sarah, my trusted photographer, posted a photo of me in a crisp white suit with a stylish pixie cut along with my story. Mark, A reporter who had worked with me for years wrote a powerful article dissecting the pressures of toxic family structures and the simmering rivalry between relatives. My story went viral, touching the hearts of thousands. I received countless messages from all over, emotional, supportive, from strangers I had never met. I knew I couldn't let this opportunity pass me by. I decided to use that wave of empathy as a springboard to start a new journey. I opened a graphic design studio called Phoenix Design, a symbol of rebirth and strength rising from the ruins. I poured my heart into my work, turning my pain and hard lessons into creative materials. Projects came to me one after another, not only because of my skills, but also because of the spirit I conveyed. I built a workspace filled with light and greenery, where each design was an affirmation of freedom and passion. I had wonderful colleagues, like-minded clients, and friends who were always ready to stand by me. On the family side, the result was an irreparable mess. Brooke and Jordan's wedding, which had seemed perfect, turned into a huge rift that could not be hidden. Mark's article, along with my own weighty comments, sent the Thompson family's reputation into freefall. Jordan, who had once been infatuated with Brooke, could not accept the cruel truth that she and her parents had created. I heard they had a huge argument, and Jordan even left the house after less than 2 weeks of living together. A marriage that began with lies could only end in failure. My parents, Susan and Michael, were shocked not only by what I said, but also by the backlash from the public, from Jordan, and from longtime friends. They tried to reach out, calling, texting, but I was silent. I needed distance, space to heal, to build a life that was no longer dictated or manipulated by old norms. A month later, my mother appeared at the studio door. She stood there, thin, haggard, no longer the authority and power she had before. "Emily, can you give me a minute?" Her voice was small and trembling. I looked at her, my heart still swollen from old wounds, but I also saw the regret in her eyes. "Come in," I said without emotion. She sat across from me, her eyes red. "I'm sorry, Emily. I'm so sorry. I was wrong. We were so biased, so afraid for Brooke, we didn't realize how much she was hurting." She told me that Brooke was in crisis, that the marriage was falling apart. I sat quietly listening, saying nothing. I knew she was sincere, but the wound inside me was still bleeding. "I will never forget, Mom," I replied, my voice firm. "But I will try to forgive. After all, you and Dad are the ones who gave birth to me. However, I need distance. I need time to rewrite my life." I set clear boundaries with my family. I still see them on holidays, but I no longer let them control me or my thoughts. I learned to say no, to pressure, to lies, to expectations that were not mine. I learned to love myself, to protect myself from the things that used to break me. Today, I am a living testament to the power of truth and courage. I traded my long hair, but gained a stronger, brighter version of myself. I lost a part of my old family, but I built a new one for myself. A family not based on blood, but on respect, love, and honesty. My life is no longer overshadowed by anyone else's. I shine in my own way, freely and proudly.